Welcome, gentlemen, and welcome to a new episode of Mind Stoic for the Modern American Man. Today we're diving into something I call 7 things an intelligent man never says. These phrases seem harmless. Maybe they sound confident. But in truth, they chip away at your credibility. They expose ego, fear, and stagnation. And once you recognize them, they're hard to unhear. Now, inspired by the timeless wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, men who taught that true power lies in discipline, humility, and intentional speech, we'll break each phrase down. How it reveals hidden weaknesses. Real-life stories that bring the lesson home. And practical takeaway questions to apply today. Before we begin, here are the 7 phrases we'll explore. 1. I already know that. 2. That's impossible. 3. That's not my fault. 4. I don't need any help. 5. I'm too old for that. 6. I'll do it later. 7. That's just who I am. Over the next 7 sections, we'll unpack each one phrase per part. And by the end, you'll not only understand why these statements undermine your intelligence, but how to reframe them into Stoic strength. If you're watching from somewhere in the US, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, listen closely. Because these are the signals that shape how people see your leadership, your maturity, your influence. Let's start with the first. Let's begin with the first phrase. I already know that. On the surface, it seems harmless, even confident. You hear someone explaining something familiar, and you feel the urge to cut in. Yeah, I know that already. But here's the truth. This isn't a display of intelligence. It's a red flag for arrogance. The Stoics warned us about this kind of thinking. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You cannot learn anything when you think you already know everything." That's not just poetic, it's brutally practical. When you say, "I already know that," you shut the door to learning. And more importantly, you send a message to those around you, "I'm not open to growth." I remember working with a mentor years ago. He was a quiet man, the kind of guy who didn't need to raise his voice to be respected. One day, he began walking me through a process I had done dozens of times. I interrupted. "Yeah, I know that already." He paused, looked at me calmly, then continued without another word. That night, it hit me. I didn't just interrupt a lesson. I robbed myself of insight. His perspective, built from years of trial, failure, and success, could have revealed something I hadn't seen. Intelligence is not about what you've memorized. It's about how willing you are to see things differently, asterisk. Let's take an example from American culture. Think about a seasoned craftsman, maybe a 60-year-old mechanic in Detroit or a carpenter in Austin. He listens when a 2-year-old apprentice explains a new tool or method. He nods, asks questions, maybe even thanks the kid. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Because he knows this. Every new set of eyes brings a new perspective. You could hear the same idea 100 times, but the 101st time, it hits different. Because asterisk, you've changed. Asterisk. Maybe now you're ready to actually understand it. The phrase, "I already know that," doesn't just block knowledge. It blocks humility. And humility is the soil where true growth happens. So what do intelligent men say instead? Try this. That's interesting, tell me more. I've seen something similar. How do you approach it? Let me hear your take on this. These aren't just polite responses. They're power moves. Because they invite perspective. They show you're not threatened by new ideas. You welcome them. The carpenter who listens. The leader who learns from the intern. The father who asks his teenage son why he sees the world differently. These are men with range, asterisk, with depth, asterisk. In American culture, especially for men, there's pressure to have it all figured out. To be the guy who knows. But real intelligence is the opposite. It's being secure enough to say, I'm still learning. I might have missed something. I want to hear this again. As Epictetus wrote, it is impossible to begin to learn that which one thinks one already knows. So next time you feel that phrase rising, I already know that, pause. Take a breath. Listen anyway. You may just catch something life-changing. And even if you don't, you practice humility. And over time, that humility turns you into someone others want to learn from. That's not just intelligence. That's mastery. Let's move on to the next phrase, intelligent men avoid. It's one that sounds practical, but in truth, it signals surrender. Phrase number 2. That's impossible. Let's talk about the second phrase, intelligent men avoid. That's impossible. It sounds reasonable at first, maybe even wise. You're in a meeting. A bold idea gets pitched. Something unfamiliar, risky. And someone leans back, arms crossed, and says, that's impossible. But here's what's really happening. They're not describing the limits of the situation. They're describing the limits of themselves, asterisk. I once worked with a man named Robert. Smart guy. Respected. He had a lot of experience, and people listened when he spoke. But every time something new was introduced, a new product idea, a strategy, a potential partnership, he had one default answer. That's impossible. Over time, people stopped pitching ideas around him. He didn't realize it, but that phrase had become a prison. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That's what Robert was doing. He wasn't analyzing the facts. He was projecting his own fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of stepping outside his comfort zone. Fear of failing publicly. And here's the twist, it didn't sound like fear. It sounded like logic, like maturity, but it was fear in disguise. Stoic wisdom teaches us that the obstacle is not the problem. It's our perception of the obstacle. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Let me show you the difference. Years later, I joined a project that by all logic should have failed. Tiny budget, tight deadlines, inexperienced team. But instead of saying, "That's impossible," I asked, "What can we control today? What's the next move?" We broke it down. One day at a time. One conversation at a time. And here's what happened. We didn't perform miracles, but we did the work. Consistently, with clarity. And that project, one of the most successful I've ever worked on. Intelligent men don't say, "That's impossible." They ask, What's possible next? What haven't we tried yet? What can I influence, even in chaos? Think of someone like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, not because of the size of their companies, but because of their refusal to see barriers as final. When people told them, "You can't build rockets," or "Private space travel is a fantasy," they didn't say, "That's impossible." They said, "Let's figure it out." Does that mean everything you try will succeed? Number. But intelligent men understand this. Impossible is often just code for, "I haven't figured it out yet." Asterisk. Let's bring this down to the personal level. Ever told yourself, "I'll never get in shape again. I can't repair that relationship. I'll never be able to change careers at this age"? Those are just more polished ways of saying, "That's impossible." But you know what's powerful? Trying anyway. Taking the next small, deliberate step. That's not blind optimism. That's disciplined courage. Asterisk. Courage doesn't scream. Sometimes it whispers, "Just do the next thing." And that's what separates intelligent men from the rest. They don't collapse at the size of the challenge. They lean in, one step at a time. The next time you're tempted to say, "That's impossible," pause. Ask instead, "What would it look like if it were possible?" Asterisk. Let's move on to the third phrase, one of the most dangerous. Not because of how it sounds, but because of what it does to your agency. Asterisk. The next phrase is, "That's not my fault." Let's move into the third phrase. "That's not my fault." It slips out so easily, especially when we feel cornered. Something goes wrong, a project fails, a relationship breaks, a plan backfires, and we feel the heat. Our instinct? Defend, protect, push the blame away. It wasn't my fault. But here's the cost of that sentence, and it's steep. Every time we say it, we give away our power. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Meaning, control lies not in what they did, but in how you choose to respond. Years ago, I watched a colleague lose a major client, one that had kept our team afloat for months. Let's call him Michael. The moment the news dropped, he started listing everything that had gone wrong, all outside of his control. The client was too demanding. The team missed the deadlines. The market was changing anyway. And sure, some of that was true. But while he defended himself, he missed the most important opportunity to grow. Asterisk. He never asked what he could have done differently. Never considered how his leadership, his tone, his communication may have contributed. He stayed stuck. That's what happens when we cling to, "It's not my fault." We don't just dodge blame. We dodge responsibility. And in doing so, we dodge our chance to evolve. Intelligent men know the truth. Responsibility is not about accepting blame for everything. It's about choosing to have influence over what happens next. In American culture, we're raised with the idea of personal accountability, but we're also rewarded for self-preservation. We're told, cover your tracks, protect your image. But here's the paradox. The men who gain the most respect aren't the ones who escape blame. They're the ones who own their part fully, honestly. When a man says, "You're right, I should have handled that better," he doesn't shrink. He expands. Asterisk. because everyone around him sees it. This is someone I can trust. I've made this mistake myself. There was a moment in my career where I missed a major opportunity simply because I didn't follow up. No one really noticed. I could have said, well, they should have reached out too, and moved on. But instead, I sat down and asked myself, what system did I lack? What assumption did I make? What could I own here quietly without making excuses? That moment reshaped how I operate. Not because it was dramatic, but because it reminded me of this truth. Power comes from ownership. Let's reframe this in practical terms. Instead of saying, "That's not my fault," try, "What part of this can I influence? Where did I lose clarity? What lesson is buried in this moment?" Responsibility is hard, but it's also magnetic. It makes you stand out in a world that runs on blame. The next time something goes wrong, whether it's a conflict at work or tension at home, pause. Resist the instinct to defend. And ask, what can I own, even if it's just 5%? You might be surprised how powerful that small shift becomes. Because once you take responsibility, you stop being a victim of circumstance and start becoming the architect of your outcome. That's what intelligent men do. They don't search for fault. They search for forward. Coming up next, a phrase that sounds noble on the outside, but hides a silent danger within. Phrase number 4, I don't need any help. Phrase number 4, I don't need any help. Sounds noble, right? Independent, strong, maybe even heroic. In America, we love this image. The self-made man, the lone cowboy, the soldier who never cracks. But behind those romantic images is a heavy cost. Because saying, "I don't need any help," and actually believing it isn't strength. It's pride, asterisk, quiet, isolating, dangerous. The truth? No man goes far alone. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, a man who held absolute power, filled his journal with gratitude to others. Mentors, friends, advisors, even slaves who taught him patience. This wasn't weakness. It was awareness. During the darkest days of the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln didn't go it alone. He surrounded himself with people who disagreed with him intentionally. His cabinet was famously called the team of rivals. And that's why he succeeded. Real intelligence doesn't reject help. It welcomes it. But let's be honest. Admitting you need help? That's terrifying. Because it feels like you're saying, "I'm not strong enough. I'm not capable. I'm failing." But the truth is, the opposite is true. Asking for help takes more strength, not less. It takes clarity. It takes humility. And most of all, it takes courage. I've seen powerful men, CEOs, military leaders, fathers, coaches, carry burdens far too long because they believed asking for help was defeat. What they didn't realize is that no one wins that way. They burn out. Relationships crack. Mental health crumbles silently behind that mask of "I'm fine." I've lived it too. There was a time I tried to carry everything myself: stress, family, deadlines, fear. And I told myself, I can handle it. I have to. Until one night, sitting alone in a dark office, I broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like something inside had run dry. I finally reached out to someone I trusted, and what I found wasn't judgment. It was connection. It was clarity. It was strength I didn't know I still had. And from that day, I learned something powerful. Carrying everything alone isn't a virtue. It's a form of quiet self-destruction. Intelligent men know this. Asking for help is not admitting defeat. It's claiming support, asterisk. It's activating the strength of others. It's saying, I want to last. I want to grow. I want to get this right. So how do you shift? Start small. Ask for advice. Ask for perspective. Ask for feedback. You don't have to collapse into someone's arms, but opening the door even a little might just change the direction of your life. In the words of Epictetus, one man by himself is not an island. We were made for cooperation. Don't fight the design of life. Lean into it. Let others stand with you so you can stand taller. And next time your pride whispers, I don't need anyone, pause and ask yourself, is that really strength speaking? Or is it fear dressed in armor? Coming up next is a phrase that sounds honest, but it's deadly to your future. Phrase number 5. I'm too old for that. Phrase number 5. I'm too old for that. It sneaks out of your mouth like a joke, a shrug, a self-deprecating laugh. But underneath, it's not funny. It's not harmless. It's one of the quietest, deadliest lies a man can tell himself. I'm too old to change careers. I'm too old to learn that. I'm too old to start over. I'm too old to chase that dream I buried 20 years ago. The truth? You're not too old. You're just afraid it might be too late. So you say that phrase to protect yourself from the risk of hope. I want to tell you about Harry Bernstein. Harry was 93 years old when he wrote his first book. Let that sink in. 93. He'd spent a lifetime working quietly as an editor, raising a family, watching his wife pass away after decades of marriage. And after all of that, he sat down and wrote his story. A memoir called The Invisible Wall, asterisk. A book that publishers rejected at first, until finally, one said yes. Harry was 96 when it hit shelves. It went global, touched hearts across continents. He went on to write 3 more books after 96. You think it's too late? Harry didn't. What matters isn't the year on your birth certificate. It's the fire that's still in you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back." He wasn't being grim. He was reminding himself, and us, that the clock is ticking, and we honor life, not by retreating from it, but by showing up fully until our very last breath. I've seen men in their 60-second launch companies. I've seen grandfathers become first-time authors. I've watched retired mechanics teach themselves coding, not because they had to, asterisk, but because they still could, asterisk. Here's what intelligent men understand. You don't age out of purpose. You don't retire from curiosity. You don't get too old to grow unless you decide to stop. When a man says, "I'm too old for that," what he's really saying is, "I'm afraid to look foolish. I'm afraid to fail publicly. I'm afraid that time has already passed me by. But listen, time didn't pass you. You paused yourself. And the beautiful thing, you can press play again. Maybe you want to learn guitar. Maybe you want to go back to school. Maybe you want to reconnect with your kids. Write that book. Start that business. Learn to dance. Then do it, asterisk, imperfectly, late, awkwardly, but do it, asterisk. Because nothing is more tragic than watching a man slowly shrink into a version of himself he no longer respects just because he thinks he missed the window. That window, it's open, right now. And the man who walks through it, that's the man we remember. Not because he stayed young, but because he stayed willing, asterisk. So next time you catch yourself saying, "I'm too old for that," stop and ask instead, what do I still want to become? Because the day you stop asking that question is the day you truly start getting old. Up next is one of the most dangerous phrases of all, not because of what it says, but because of what it delays, asterisk. Phrase number 6. I'll do it later. Phrase number 6. I'll do it later. Harmless, right? Just a delay. Just a postponement. But this is the phrase that kills more dreams than failure ever will. I'll call my dad next week. I'll fix things with my wife when work slows down. I'll start writing that book once I get some time. I'll finally take care of my health next month. But here's the brutal truth. Later is a lie. Life doesn't hand out extensions. It doesn't send reminders. It doesn't guarantee another chance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." Not as a warning, but as a clarifier, asterisk, to strip away illusion and show you what really matters, asterisk. I knew a man named Thomas, wealthy, respected, admired, but always busy. Too busy to visit his aging father, too busy to slow down with his kids, too busy to take care of his own soul. And then one day, his father was gone. No goodbye, no final conversation, just a silence that would haunt him for the rest of his life. That's what later costs us. If there's a conversation you've been avoiding, have it. If there's a dream you've buried, unearth it. If there's a person you've hurt, reach out. Now, today. Because intelligent men understand this law. Regret multiplies when action is delayed. The man who moves even clumsily, even late, lives with clarity. The man who waits lives in chains. And that brings us to the final phrase. Number 7. That's just who I am. It sounds honest, even self-aware, but it's often a prison in disguise. I've heard it from angry men. I lose my temper, that's just who I am. From emotionally distant men. I don't open up, that's just who I am. From avoidant men. I don't do commitment, that's just who I am. But that's not identity. That's resistance. The Stoics believed that we are not fixed. We are formable, asterisk, capable of change. But only if we're brave enough to question the stories we've told ourselves. That's just who I am is often a shield, a way to protect ourselves from the discomfort of growth. Because change is hard. It means confronting our patterns. It means admitting we're not finished yet. But here's the power move. Drop the label. Replace it with this. That's who I've been, asterisk. But it's not who I have to be. Because every day you get to rewrite, to rebuild, to rise. The man who believes he's unchangeable is already dead inside. But the one who wakes up and says, I'm a work in progress and proud of it, that's the man who will outgrow them all. So if any of these 7 phrases have lived in your mouth, you're not alone. I've said them too. We all have. But now you see them. And once you see, you cannot unsee. So here's your challenge. Catch yourself. Pause. Replace reaction with intention. Speak like a man who's mastered himself, one word at a time. Because the most intelligent men aren't the loudest. They're the ones who listen, asterisk, who learn, asterisk, and who lead, by choosing their words as carefully as they choose their actions. This is the Stoic way. Be that man.